As any NBA fan knows, last year the Atlanta Hawks made a very impressive run in the playoffs in the first round, beating the team with probably the best defense in the NBA that season in the New York Knicks very easily in 5 games, and then in the second round pulling off the upset against the number 1 seeded Philadelphia 76ers and eliminating them in 7 games as well, and then losing in 6 games to the eventual champions in the Milwaukee Bucks. But obviously they made a really impressive run last season, and before that season the Hawks didn't have a lot of hype. Some people even had them missing the playoffs, but they proved those doubters wrong. They came in that season, had an amazing run, but going into next season, that's going to be starting in a couple days as I'm recording this video, the Hawks aren't getting a lot of hype just because they didn't make any major trades or free agent moves in the offseason, and the attention is going to some other new teams that have newly constructed their rosters with some big free agent signings, big trades, teams like the Chicago Bulls, the Miami Heat, and already the teams that are probably going to be atop of the Eastern Conference like the Nets and the Bucks. But I honestly think the Hawks will be a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference this season. In my standings predictions video, I had them finishing 4th, and in today's video I'm going to go in depth on just how good of a team they are going into this season and why they probably are legitimately championship contenders again this season. So let's get into the video. Let's start off by talking about the Atlanta Hawks offense and how it succeeded so well last season, and really overall this offense is just such a well-rounded as a team. They have pretty much good players at every aspect on the offensive side of the floor, and obviously offensively for this team it all starts with their superstar caliber player in Trae Young. I mean, really last year he emerged as one of the better scorers in the league, and what he did in the regular season was one thing, scoring-wise averaging 25.3 points per game, creating his own shot a lot at the time at the top of the key, taking a lot of step-back threes, a lot of tough shots in the pick and roll in the mid-range area, a lot of tough layups around the rim, and still shooting a 59% true shooting, which is a plus 1.5 relative true shooting in the NBA right now, which is very impressive for Trae's play style, and that was one thing. And then in the playoffs he took it to a whole new level, averaging 29 points per game on only 55% true shooting, which is below average efficiency in the league right now, but just his sheer volume scoring alone is so impressive. And what Trae was doing scoring the basketball last season, especially near the end of the season and into the playoffs, was extremely impressive, and one of the main things that really showed that he's turning into one of the best offensive players in the game right now. What impresses me even more about Trae is just how good of a playmaker he is. I mean, he struggles with turnovers at times, but still overall averages about a 2.5 to 1 assist to turnover ratio, which is still very good, and he did that pretty much both in the regular season and playoffs last year, averaging 9.5 assists per game along with 4 turnovers per game, which I think he will clean up next season as well as he continues to mature as a player and get more used to the NBA atmosphere and how he can turn the ball over a lot. I think he will improve on this next season, and overall Trae's playmaking was just so impressive last season, as both in the regular season and the playoffs he led the entire league in box creation with 18 open shots created for his teammates per game, which is obviously very impressive as well for really such a young player who is really emerging as one of the top 5 best playmakers in the NBA right now, and absolutely showed that in both the regular season and the playoffs last season. So obviously their offense is run by him, and he's done an incredible job both scoring and creating open shots for his teammates. And then this team is just so well rounded when it comes to their offense as well. We look at their secondary and tertiary scoring options with John Collins and Clint Capella. We look at John Collins, who last year almost averaged 20 points per game on 56% from the field, and also shot over 40% from 3 last season, proving that he can stretch it out and shoot the 3 as well and space the floor for this team. And overall they do have great shooting. I'll talk about that a little bit later on as well, but he's also a very, very good lob threat, elite around the rim, a very good finisher, and a very good post player as well. And what I like the most about him is, like I mentioned, his ability to be a lob threat. And then their tertiary guy scoring wise in Clint Capella is also a very good lob threat, a great screener, and a very good pick and roll partner for Trae Young, and can get a lot of easy lobs around the rim as well, and is also one of the best rebounders in the league, as last year he led the entire NBA in rebounds per game with over 14 per game, gets a lot of offensive rebounds, cleans up the glass, and like I said, is a very good lob threat. And then probably the best part of this offense, in my opinion, is how they've surrounded their superstar in Trae Young with very good spacing and great overall shooting. They've got sharpshooters on this team like Bogdan Bogdanovic, Lou Williams, Danilo Gallinari, Kevin Huerter, even a guy like Cam Reddish, who hasn't really shot the three well in his NBA career so far, but showed a glimpse of it last season in the playoffs. He attempted a total of 14 three-point attempts in the playoffs last year and made 9 of them, which is a very small sample size, obviously, but extremely impressive. And we saw him at his Duke days as well. We know how good of a shooter he could develop into, and I think if he's fully healthy this season and plays a fully healthy season, he could maybe even shoot over 40% from 3 in this upcoming season. And even like I mentioned, John Collins, who developed a three-point shot last year and shot over 40% from 3. I'm going to put up on the screen right now all of the guys that I mentioned and their three-point percentage last season, and also how many attempts they took from 3 per game, so their volume shooting. And you can see here that definitely their main shooting options are very reliable options from 3, can do it on a high volume, and definitely space the floor very well for guys like Trae Young. And when Trae and Capella are running a pick and roll, they know that the floor can be spaced, and if it isn't, that they can kick it out to the perimeter for an easy 3-point shot. And having 3-point shooting like this is so important for a team like this who wants to succeed at a very high level in the NBA playoffs. As we know, 3-point shooting in the NBA right now is pretty much as important as ever, and the Hawks have definitely done a great job of surrounding their team with good shooting. Overall, as a team last year, they shot about 37.2% from 3, and did this overall attempting an average per game of 33.5 field goal attempts from 3. So overall, this team's offense is very impressive and very diverse. Like I said, they have their main superstar caliber player, scorer, and playmaker in Trae Young. Their second and third options scoring wise in John Collins and Clint Capella, who are very good lob threats, and some very good shooting surrounding their main guy in Trae Young. And overall, last season, the Hawks had the 9th best offensive rating in the regular season, with a 114.3 offensive rating, which is pretty impressive for a pretty young and new team. And I definitely expect them to progress on this season and probably be a top 7 to 6 offensive team. And this overall diverse and at times dominant offensive system and team is definitely going to help them make another championship push potentially next season. Now, I think what impressed me most about the Hawks in their run to the Eastern Conference Finals last season, and something that I think they're going to continue to improve on this season, was their defense, and especially how Nate McMillan made a lot of tactical adjustments to really allow this team's defense to succeed at a pretty high level during the NBA playoffs last season. Now, overall, as a defensive team in the regular season, the Hawks didn't have a great defensive team and defensive system, as they had the 18th best defensive rating in the league and an overall defensive rating of 112.5. But in the playoffs, they did improve that and made it a total defensive rating of 110.5. and ranked 8th in the NBA playoffs overall. And obviously it's harder to succeed defensively in the playoffs because you're playing against the best offenses across the entire NBA. But the Hawks were able to improve their defense in the NBA playoffs, and it was mostly because of Clint Capella. I mean, having a good rim protector on your team and a great pick and roll defender is so vital to team success nowadays, as we've seen with the Utah Jazz. You take Rudy Gobert off that team, they probably have about an average defense because he just has so much impact on that team. It's the same thing with Clint Capella on the Hawks. Last year in the NBA playoffs, the Hawks kind of had this strategy of allowing defenders to drive into the paint towards Capella, and in the pick and roll, allowing them again to drive towards him when they move into the paint. And because of these adjustments that Nate McMillan made, it was really able to maximize Clint Capella's defensive value, and not to mention too that when he was going head-to-head against Joel Embiid a lot, especially in the post, he was able to do a great job there just because of how good and strong of a one-on-one defender he is down low as well. And something I really like about this Hawks defense is how they're able to hide their bad defenders. For example, their main superstar player in Trae Young, it's no secret that he's one of the worst defensive players in the league, unfortunately, but they're able to do this system where they're able to hide him. A lot of the times he's in the corner, and it's kind of hard to explain when I'm not going through the video, but when you watch this team play, you'll see a lot of times where the opposing offense will try to run a play to get the player with the ball on Trae Young and try to expose the fact that he's a defensive liability, but the Hawks will be able to use rotations and move in a way that Trae Young is not guarding the ball a lot of the time. And this is something they do with some of their other bad defenders. I mean, a guy like Kevin Huerter can sometimes be a good defender, but depending on his matchup, sometimes he's not, but sometimes they're able to hide him as well. And overall, they do a great job of this, a great job of maximizing Capela's value defensively, and they also have some pretty talented on-ball defenders, a guy like DeAndre Hunter, who really showed his value on both ends of the floor last season, but especially defensively, showing that he's one of the better young one-on-one defenders in the game, a guy like John Collins, who specifically in that first round did a great job one-on-one against Julius Randle and showed his defensive value. And overall, this team was really emerging as a defense, and they showed that the peak of their defense last season was in the playoffs, and I feel like they will be able to carry that into next season. If you guys want my prediction on this team's defense, I truly think that they will be a top 10 defensive team in the NBA next season when it comes to defensive rating, mostly because of just the value of Capela, how they've played as a defense together last season and have better chemistry now, and just how smart of a defensive coach Nate McMillan really is. So their defense impressed me a lot last season, and I think going into this season, I think they'll have probably a top 7 offense and a top 10 defense, which will absolutely lead them to very good success in this Eastern Conference. And like I said, I think they're going to get the 4th seed and probably make another push for a potential championship run with their success on both ends of the floor. Something I wanted to briefly mention about this Hawks team as well is how they have a really bright future, and especially in this year's draft got a couple of hidden gems that I think will be proven in the next few years that they were the biggest steals of this draft, and also have young guys that I've kind of touched on, like Cam Reddish, who hasn't really gotten a fully healthy season under his belt yet, but has a lot of potential as not only a defender but also a very good three-point shooter. So I think he could have a lot more value for this team this season than he did last season, being out most of last season. I talked about DeAndre Hunter and how he has been very good defensively, will continue to improve there and progress as an overall player. Last year averaged 15 points per game and was really one of the main scoring options for this team and is one of the most underrated players in the game, and I think he will continue to improve as well. And then some of the guys they got in the draft this year, a guy like Sharif Cooper, who many people are saying that he's a steal of the draft and could have a lot of impact for this team in the future. A guy like Jalen Johnson, who I definitely think went way too late in this draft and is probably a big steal as well. And their first round pick in last year's draft in Onyeka Okongwu, who has a lot of potential, especially defensively as a rim protector as well, and on the offensive end of the floor as a screener, a guy in the pick and roll, a lob threat, and a post player. And he definitely overall has a lot of potential as well. So to conclude today's video, I think the Hawks this season are being slept on going into this season and could make another potential championship run. I think they'll be a top 4 seed in the East this year with their offense, their overall complete and well-rounded offense that I think could be top 8 or top 7 in the NBA this season. Their great defensive system, which proved to be very good last season and will, in my opinion, continue to be that way this season and probably be a top 10 defense in the regular season, and they have a pretty bright future on this team. So I appreciate you guys for watching today's video. Comment down below your thoughts on the Atlanta Hawks going into next season, and I'll see you all next video.